from them at that time, as they have behaved themselves ill in their doing. So he's going to turn away from them. He's going to let that judgment come upon them because of what he's done to what they've done to their people. They're going to pay for that. And so, we go on to verse 5. Thus saith the Lord concerning the prophets that make my people err, that bite with their teeth and cry, Peace. And he that putteth not into their mouths, they even prepare war against him. Therefore, night shall be unto you, that ye shall not have vision, and it shall be dark unto you, that ye shall not divine. And the sun shall go down over the prophets, and that day shall be dark over them. Then the seers shall be ashamed, and the diviners confounded. Yea, they shall all cover their lips, for there is no answer of God. And so, here he talks about their judgment upon them. So, these false prophets that have been, saying that, God, we're basically, we're in Jerusalem. We're Judah. We're here where God's house is. He's not going to do anything to us. That, he's telling them that. It shall be dark. We're looking at this, these words, night, dark. The sun shall go down. It shall be dark over them. You see that time of distress, and you see that that he's doing this to take away these false visions, and they won't be able to divine. They'll go to these people that are supposedly talking to God, and they God's not going to allow them to do these things any longer. Then they're going to be ashamed, and it talks about covering their lips, and that's a sign of mourning. It's sorrow or uncleanliness, and we can contrast that to verse 8 here as we start into this next portion where. Micah talks about the things that the blessings that he has from God because he is a true prophet, and he says, "But truly I am full of power by the Spirit of the Lord, and of judgment and of might to declare unto Jacob his transgressions and to Israel his sin." So these false prophets, have nothing to stand on. God's going to judge them and, not allow them to, be able to do these false prophecies for money. But instead, Micah talks about how God gives them, that power. He gives them the, ability to, judgment, that ability to discern, and that might to be able to, declare the things that God wants them to declare unto the people of Israel, so they can turn from their sins. And, we go on to verse 9 where he starts to speak to these same leaders, the heads and the princes. And he says, "Hear this, I pray you, ye heads of the house of Jacob, and ye princes of the house of Israel, that abhor judgment and pervert all equity. They build up Zion with blood, and Jerusalem with iniquity. The heads thereof judge for reward, and the priests thereof reach for hire, and the prophets thereof divine for money. Yet will they lean upon the Lord and say, Is not the Lord among us? None evil can come upon us." And so, here again, let's go on to verse 12. "Therefore shall Zion for your sake be plowed as a field, and Jerusalem shall become heaps, and the mountain of the house as the most high places, as the high places of the forest." And so, here he is talking to them, again. He's talking about how they hate that good judgment, and they've perverted all of this, all of these rules and things that they're supposed to do for their own benefit. And he brings specific charges against them. He says that they build up Zion with bloodshed, that they fill Jerusalem with iniquity, or that word in Hebrew would also mean crookedness. They've taken everything that's good and holy about the people, and then they've become crooked and perverted, and they've looked just like the other heathen nations around them. They were supposed to be holy and set apart, but they've allowed this to happen. And then he speaks again to the heads, and he talks about them, judging for reward. They're taking bribes in order to, judge and do these things for these people. They're taking bribes under the table and letting people go because they were given money. And then he talks about the priests. They're doing these things for hire. They're being paid basically tell people what they want to hear about about God, instead of what they actually needed to hear. And then again, prophets are divining for money. They're taking people's money and giving them these false prophecies. And yet they're doing all these things, and at the same time they're trying to lead upon the Lord and saying, "Is not the Lord among us?" Because again, they're in Jerusalem. They're in there where the temple is, the house of the Lord. However, God lets them know that because here we go with therefore, He's going to release that judgment. Zion, for your sake, will be plowed as a field, so it's going to be just leveled. It's going to be just a field, is what He's saying. That Jerusalem will be just heaps, and the house of the most, and the house is the most high place is a forest. Everything's going to, that their city is going to be destroyed, and it's going to go back and be like no one had ever been there, completely desolate. And then we go on here to Micah verse 4, and let's look at verses 1 through 5 first, because we're talking about this judgment. We're going to change over to a vision here for the future that Micah has. It says, "But in the last days it shall come to pass that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established in the top of the mountains, and it shall be exalted above the hills, and the people shall flow into it. Many nations shall come and say, Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord and to the house of God of Jacob, and He will teach us His ways, and we will walk in His paths, for the law shall go forth of Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He shall judge among many people and rebuke strong nations afar off, and they shall beat their swords into plowshares and their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up a sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more, but shall sit every man under his vine and under his fig tree, and none shall make them afraid, for the mouth of the Lord of hosts have spoken it." All right, so we start out here with in the last days. So that's used several times in these minor prophets, and it's talking about the coming day of the Lord, and so that's what we're speaking on and focusing on here. And he talks about that the mountain of the house of the Lord, and the mountain is used as a sign of might in the Old Testament, and strength. We can and in fact we can go to let's go back to Daniel here for a moment. Daniel chapter 2. And verse 35, because this same picture of this mountain is used here, when it talks about in Daniel's vision. And this is with the statue. And it says, "Then was iron, the clay, the brass, the silver, and the gold broken into pieces together and became like chaff of the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, that no place was found for them. And the stone that smote the image became a great mountain and filled the whole earth." And that's talking about Christ and His kingdom, and so it's showing His power and His might. And here it talks about it being exalted, being established on the top of the mountains and exalted above the hills, exalted above all these heathen nations. And then, again, we have in verse 2 talking about the nations, and many nations shall come. And, that I'm sure that it puts you in mind of some of Jesus saying here in the New Testament. Let's look at Matthew 24 and verse 14. Let me... Right, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. And so, again, here we're talking about, these many nations shall come. So that, it's talking about, the coming of Christ and, the gospel being spread out. And then, beyond that, here we are talking about that, God will teach us His ways, and beyond that, just the teaching, we're going to internalize it. We're going to walk in His paths, and so the law will go forth from Zion. And the word of the Lord will be spread, from Jerusalem. It will be spread all over the whole earth. And then he will judge among many people. So God will be judging and among all these nations, and rebuke these nations that would be against Israel, even if they're far off. These Gentile nations that are against Israel. And then he talks about the ending of some of these wars, with their swords being turned into plowshares and spears into pruning hooks. So their weapons of war will be turned into things of agriculture to take care of the land. And he goes on to say that neither they shall learn war anymore. And then in verse 4 we have this proverb that a proverb here. It says, "But they shall sit every man under his vine and under his fig tree," and that just shows that perfect security and peace. Once God's reign is established and set up. And then let's go on to verses 5 through 7 here, and it says. "For all people will walk every one in the name of his God, and we will walk in the name of the Lord our God forever. In that day, saith the Lord, will I assemble her and halteth, and I will gather her that is driven out, and her that I have afflicted, and I will make her that halted a remnant, and her that was cast off a strong nation, and the Lord shall reign over them in Mount Zion from henceforth even forever." And so again, he's talking about here he's referring to the exile and Israel being scattered in these heathen nations. But but despite that, they're going to walk in the name of the Lord, forever. Nothing's going to, they're going to be brought back, and they'll be able to walk in the name of the Lord forever here. And so he says, again, in that day, he's going to assemble all of them. Those that were gathered and driven out and afflicted because of this judgment upon them will be brought back and restored. And even that remnant that was afar off, he's going to bring them back in together, and he's going to make Israel a strong nation again, is what he's saying. And he's going to reign over them from Zion, and he's going to do that forever. And then we go on to let's look at finishing out. Sorry, I got to verse 6. Let's go ahead and go through verse 13. So let me go through 8 through 13 here. "And thou, O tower of the flock, the stronghold of the daughter of Zion, unto thee it shall come, even the first dominion, and the kingdom shall come to the daughter of Jerusalem. Now why dost thou cry out aloud? Is there no king in thee? Is thy counselor perished? For pangs have been taken thee as a woman in travail," or giving birth. "Be in pain and labor to bring forth, O daughter of Zion, like a woman in travail. For now shalt thou go forth out of the city, and thou shalt dwell in the field, and thou shalt go even unto Babylon. There thou shalt be delivered. There the Lord shall redeem thee from the land and thine enemies. Now also many nations are gathered against thee, that they say, Let her be defiled, and let our eye look upon Zion. But they know not of the thoughts of the Lord, neither they understand his counsel. For he shall gather them as sheaves into the floor. Arise and thresh, O daughter of Zion, for I will make thine horn iron, and I will make thy hooves brass, and thou shalt beat into pieces many people. And I will consecrate their gain unto the Lord, and their substance unto the Lord of the whole earth." And so, here again continues to talk about bringing them back and doing that restoration, and it even specifically talks about which nation it will be that they'll go into exile into, which is Babylon. And the thing that's amazing about this is that exile wasn't until 586 to 537 BC. So this is many years beforehand. In fact, Babylon wasn't the strongest power at the time. Instead, it was Assyria. Babylon would have been a second or third rate country. But, God went ahead and gave Micah this vision and gave him specifically how this is going to happen with it being Babylon, that they're going into the exile to and that they're going to be brought out of. All right, so let's go on to this last chapter here, or this next chapter here, Micah 5, and let me start with 1 through 5 here. It says, "Now gather thyself in troops, O daughter of troops. He hath laid siege against thee, or against us. They shall smite the judge of Israel with a rod upon the cheek. But thou, Bethlehem, Ephrat, though thou be little among the thousands of Judah, yet out of thee shall come forth unto me that is to be ruler in Israel, whose going forth have been of old from everlasting. Therefore will he give them up until that time that she which travaileth have brought forth. The remnant of his brethren shall return unto the children of Israel, and he shall stand and feed in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God, and they shall abide for now, shall be great unto the ends of the earth. And this man shall be the peace, when Assyria shall come into our land, and when he shall tread in our places, even then we shall rise up against him 7 shepherds and 8 principal men." All right, so at this time, let's start with verse 1 here. So this is talking about the siege on Jerusalem by the Assyrian king. See if I can pronounce his name here. I believe it was Sennacherib, I think is how you pronounce that name. But he was the king of Assyria at the time, and they had laid siege upon Jerusalem and Hezekiah, and it was it was an awful time, and they were just there huddled together trying to fend them off, and that's what it's talking about here is specifically that smiting the judge of Israel upon the cheek. This would it's literally a smack in the face. It's a very a very demeaning thing. It's a very insulting thing. Basically, it's you're just taunting him, and but we're looking through that. He gives this promise of what will come. Out of Bethlehem, the city, and Ephrat is the district. So it would be like naming let's say Limestone out of Washington County. It would be like naming that, getting specific there, and so he names specifically, and he's talking about here the Messiah will come out of Bethlehem. And Bethlehem is just a very small city. It was where David was born, but it's a small city out of Judah, just 6 miles from Jerusalem. Again, nothing special, nothing anybody would have paid attention to. He lets them know that out of these shall come forth unto me that is to be ruler of Israel. Out of this it's going to be the Messiah that's coming, and we know that it's specifically referring to Christ because he's talking about the goings forth being from old, from everlasting, or from the days of eternity is would be the literal translation. And so he talks about what the Messiah is going to do, and he's going to stand and feed in the strength of the Lord. And he's talking about feed as in like as in a shepherd. And we can look at that also. Isaiah being one of being at the same time as Micah here, being one of his cohorts, mentioned the same thing here in Isaiah 61 and verse 5. Let me flip over to that, and I'll read that. or it talks about shepherds feeding the flocks, I'm sorry. And it says, and strangers shall stand and feed your flocks, again, to care for your flocks. And the son of the alien shall be your plowman and your vine dresser. So, sorry, this was actually talking about, them going into, captivity, but, that's how he's talking about this. This feeding is, feeding and, caring for these sheep just like a shepherd would. And then, so God will be the shepherd with the strength of the Lord, and He's going to be great unto the ends of the earth. So all of the earth He's going to be great until all of the earth. And then here they're talking about Assyria, and I wanted to point out that Assyria being the strongest power, that's why that was chosen. It may not necessarily mean like literally the Assyria in that day, because they will. In the Bible, they use that same, they use the same names for these locations, even though there's another country there. So Syria is more of an archetype, for all these nations that are against Israel. And then it talks about here that will rise against him 7 shepherds and 8 principal men, and the importance of that is you have 7. That's the number of perfection or fulfillment, and then 8 would be a number of sufficiency. So it's basically an idiom saying that it's going to be fully sufficient. All these men that will be fully sufficient to take on these armies that will be coming against them. And so again, let's go on to verses 6, and we'll read through verse 15. Right, and they shall waste the land of Assyria with the sword, and the land of Nimrod, and the entrances thereof. Thus shall he deliver us from the Assyrian, when he cometh into our land, and when he treadeth within our borders. And the remnant of Jacob shall be in the midst of many people, as dew from the Lord, as the showers upon the grass, that tareth not for man, nor waiteth for the sons of men. And the remnant of Jacob shall be among the Gentiles, in the midst of many people, as a lion among the beasts of the forest, a young lion among the flocks of the sheep, who, if he go through, both treadeth down and teareth in pieces, and none can deliver. Thine hand shall be lifted up upon thine adversaries, and all thine enemies shall be cut off. And it shall come to pass in that day, saith the Lord, I will cut off thy horses out of the midst of thee, and I will destroy thy chariots, and I will cut off the cities of thy land, and throw down all thy strongholds. And I will cut off witchcrafts out of thine hand, and thou shalt have no more soothsayers. Thy graven images also will I cut off, and thy standing image out of the midst of thee, and thou shalt no more worship the work of thine hands. And I will pluck up thine groves out of the midst of thee, so I will destroy thy cities. And I will execute vengeance and anger and fury upon the heathen, such as they have not heard. And so we start here, and so let's start with verse 6 here. It's talking about laying waste to the land of Assyria, which is just just the area. And here's another example that I was talking about where we'll use that same name for the location, but it's not that country anymore. So you have the land of Nimrod, which is basically Mesopotamia, but that's a reference to Nimrod from Genesis, and Genesis 10 and 8. That was he was a great warrior, and that was his land in Mesopotamia. Let me keep turning back here. He was the son of Cush, and it says, and Cush begat Nimrod. He began to be a mighty one in the earth. And verse 9 says, he was a mighty hunter before the Lord. Wherefore it is said, even as Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord. And so we'll still use that same name for that area in Mesopotamia where he ruled. And he talks, and then here it says that they're going to be delivered. These lands will be laid waste, and they will be delivered from these heathen nations. And the remnant, Israel, will be as a dew from the Lord, showers upon the grass. These are blessings for the Lord, or from the Lord. I don't know about you, but like I know that they're out in the desert. It's probably going to be hot and dry, and so I'm sure anytime that they saw that little bit of water, even if it was a little bit of dew on the grass or a little bit of showers, that was a blessing. I know that even here where it's not dry, that in the summer when it's so hot, that it's nice to have that that dew in the morning or that nice shower to get the grass nice and wet and try to cool things off, and it does feel like a blessing. All right, and then he goes on talking about the remnant of Jacob being among the Gentiles as a lion. They're this strong animal that specifically talks about being a young lion among these flocks of sheep, and that they're going to be this mighty nation, and they'll be able to tread down and tear into pieces, and they won't be able to defend themselves against it. In fact, he says that. He promises Israel that thine hand shall be lifted up upon thine adversaries, and that all of their enemies will be cut off. And then we look at these things, and it's interesting. He's talking about all these adversaries being cut off, and he talks about in that day, and this is what he's going to cut off: horses and chariots. He's going to their cities and throw down their strongholds, these witchcrafts and soothsayers and graven images and standing images, and these groves. These things that get in the way of worshiping God, taking off these horses that they ride into battle, and then they see themselves so lifted up and high for, and their mighty chariots, their mighty army. They're relying on these instead of God, and they're great cities that they talk about, and again they're looking more at these cities and their greatness and the things that they've done instead of God, and their strongholds instead of God being their stronghold. They're looking at these great fortresses that they built, and said, "Oh, look at these fortresses. We can't be invaded." And then then you look at these other things where they're looking at trying to find these spiritual things, and they're looking in the wrong places with witchcrafts and soothsayers and graven images. And so he's going to knock all these down in these groves, and so that they will have to focus upon the Lord and what the Lord wants, and praying unto Him and being completely reliant on Him. And then he finishes this out that he's going to execute vengeance, or his judgment and anger and fury upon the heathen, upon the nations. So these nations that have not heard or obeyed God, he's going to unleash his fury upon. And so with closing that, we need to remember that it doesn't matter what nation it is. That if you turn against God, whether it be Canada, the United States, or India or these other smaller nations, if you turn against God and don't listen unto Him, you're going to have judgment. It's the same for us personally. If we don't listen to God and turn to Him, God's going to unleash that judgment. And so I hope that we can keep that in mind as we go out into the world throughout this week, and that we can use that as a way to talk to people and evangelize that if not one of us have done anything good. So if God's just and He's going to unleash that judgment, that if you don't want to be under that judgment and you want to serve someone who's taken that judgment upon himself for you, then you can turn unto God. All right, so I'll go ahead and close us here in a word of prayer. Lord, we thank You again for allowing us to come together here today. God, I thank You for everything that I've studied this week, and Lord, I thank You for that, allowing me to be a blessing unto me to read through Your Word and learn these things. And God, I pray that what I did for You today was sufficient, and that everyone here was able to learn and pick something up from it, Lord, and You would allow them to internalize that and take that out of beyond these church walls, and continue to lift up Your name and Your kingdom, Lord. And God, I pray that we continue to do that and have that mindset as we go throughout Your worship here today, Lord, that we would that you would be with those that are up in the choir and the choir director. And Lord, I pray that you would be with our pastor and you would help him be prepared to deliver the sermon and message that you want him to deliver, to continue to lift us up and build and strengthen us in your word, Lord, so that we become closer to you and be able to better fulfill your requests for your kingdom, Lord. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.